In this video, I'm going to tell you how I learned to compose video game music fast. If you're a solo indie game dev or aspiring video game composer, this video will provide you with a 3-step plan for creating music quickly and efficiently. This plan requires work, but is simple and effective. Again, the goal of this video is to teach you how I compose fast. While I will give a few suggestions regarding software and plugins, this isn't a step-by-step tutorial on music production. Think of this video rather as a guide to designing any video game soundtrack. This guide consists of 3 steps. 1. Create a game plan for your soundtrack. 2. Gather necessary resources. 3. Compose your music. Again, these steps may seem simple, but they are effective. I've worked as a composer in the video game industry for over half a decade, and these are still pretty much the same steps I follow with almost every project. They work, they can be repeated by anyone, and most importantly, they get results. Step 1. Create a game plan. Before we even think about writing a single note, we need to know how many tracks we're writing, the general length, and emotional tone. What we need is a game plan. The best way to come up with a game plan for your soundtrack is to use a spreadsheet. Even something simple like a notepad can work. We're doing this step to remove uncertainty about what we need to accomplish. When we list out every track we need to compose, their approximate length and emotional tone, we're also figuring out what music is absolutely necessary for our game and what's more of a want. This doesn't mean our track list is absolutely set in stone, but rather gives us a realistic starting and end point to completing the audio portion of our project. The most effective developers I've worked with always provide me with a list of work they need done, even if it's a few lines of text. To create your preliminary track list, come up with a list of all the levels, zones, or unique areas in your game. List them all out. Think of any special events, battles, or screens that may require musical material and add them to the list. Finally, if your game has any one-shot musical moments like deaths, power-ups, and such, add those to the list as well. Ta-da! And with that, your preliminary track list is done. Your track list may be short or long, either is fine. The important thing is to quantify the amount of composing that must be done. With this, we can systematically work through our list. We know where to begin and where to stop. This in itself can be a huge motivator when working creatively. Step 2. Gather your resources. Many video game music tutorials focus on using specific software, plugins, and workstations in order to create the perfect soundtrack. This is largely unnecessary. You should pick whatever software is relevant, effective, and hopefully cheap and/or free. In fact, there's so much free music software, you can probably get away with paying almost nothing and still producing an excellent soundtrack. This is especially attractive if you're a beginner composer or indie dev. For example, the first commercial project I worked on was a game called Pirate Pop Plus in 2016. Pirate Pop Plus is a retro-style arcade game with 8-bit graphics similar to the Game Boy or original NES. Knowing this was key to finding the right tool. And that tool was FamiTracker, a free tracker program that can authentically emulate the 2A03 chip used in the original Nintendo. The goal of this step is to minimize the tools and resources we're using so we can get going on the composition process as fast as possible. The program you choose doesn't have to be perfect. It needs to be good enough to get the job done. The same goes with any asset you're given as well. We only need a rough idea of the game, its setting, and general emotional impact the music should have. At the same time, we need to get briefly acquainted with our resources. For any piece of software you pick up, I'd advise watching a short tutorial or at least playing around with the basic functions. You don't need to do a full deep dive on the program or to master it. From personal experience, I've always found it more effective to have a general working knowledge of a program and then to solve specific issues as they arise. Watching too many tutorials can lead to paralysis, but if you are learning FamiTracker, I have a tutorial on that. Wink wink. Step 3. Compose your music. After you've created a game plan for your soundtrack and gathered your necessary resources, it's finally time to sit down and compose music. For beginners, the easiest way to create a compelling soundtrack is to base your musical world off your game's world setting. Use musical tropes. The game you're creating a soundtrack for exists in a world. It has a setting which may include a specific time period, imagery, or at least a general theme. A A game setting, in essence, is a remix of various past ideas into something new. As such, we can draw upon musical tropes that already exist within the setting. Does your game take place in the Wild West? How about the big city? What about a spooky, ghost-infested graveyard? All these settings have musical tropes that are easily recognizable and help place the player within the game's world. These can be anything from an instrument like a guitar player in the Wild West, to chord progressions for a game in the big city, or sometimes a simple sound effect will suffice. If you're a game dev, try listing out what inspired your game. If it was some form of media, it most likely has an existing musical trope attached to it. If you're a composer, ask the game dev what inspired them. Listen to the music that inspired the game and try to pick one thing that makes it stand out. If you're still not sure, there's tons of musical analysis online. In particular, this channel has a video about borrowing musical concepts between games. Remember, as a composer, you're in the driver's seat and you don't necessarily have to use reference tracks or musical tropes. These are merely suggestions and at best, inspiration. After you've found a musical setting you like, it's time to finally write the music you want. With your track list ready, select the track you feel would be the shortest in length to compose. If you're a new composer, you want to work on small tasks you can accomplish easily. We do this for several reasons. First, you'll most likely be learning new software while also learning to compose music. Second, shorter pieces require less music composition and therefore give you more freedom to design the sound palette or set of instruments you want to work with. Lastly, it's easier to iterate on or create multiple versions of the same track if the piece you're writing is really short. Additionally, unused iterations can often be repurposed or at least composted for ideas. Remember, composing music is a complicated process. If you need help learning to write, there are other videos on this channel to help you do so. Additionally, if you're interested in licensing music for your game, I have several music packs available, some of which were used in the creation of this video. I hope you found this useful, and any comments or questions are greatly appreciated. Thanks for watching.